Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to talk about 3 big reasons why your muscle building is failing, why your muscle building efforts are failing. Before we get into this topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos just like this. All right, I'm joined by Robert Shinetsky, the supplement engineer, who you can find every Friday on our live videos, Friday at 11 Eastern. So, Robert, we got 3 big reasons why your muscle building is failing. We were talking about the science, the latest science on muscle building, and why some of it contradicts the way lifters used to train, right? The way lifters have been programmed to train. So, before we dive into this, Robert, explain to folks that what we're basing this on isn't just 1 or 2 studies. This is the body of work or the meta-analysis. Can you kind of touch on what a meta-analysis is?
Yeah, so the hypertrophy field has really exploded probably within the last 4 or 5 years to where before we had 1 or 2 studies showing, oh, well, German volume training gives you this kind of result. Super low frequency gives you this result. Super high volume gives you this result. And now so many more studies have been starting to be being published by Brad Schoenfeld's group and many other groups from around the world that we're starting to get a considerable enough body of evidence that we can actually start to pool all of these individual studies together, tabulate all the data, combine it, and get a meta-analysis to where we're not just using one single study and saying, oh, this is the way to do it. We've now got an entire body of literature to where we can run various statistical analyses and get a bigger, larger group picture of saying, hey, what actually happens when we combine all of these studies? What's, because each study is reporting an average, but what are the averages of all of these averages showing us, over the long term? And that'll ultimately give us a better picture of what to do for the average individual.
It's actually an exciting year for hypertrophy because of this. We have so many studies, and we're really having a lot of the experts dig into the studies. And I don't recall a year like this before where we've had some dramatic turnarounds because a lot of, like in the old days, the old type of training is framed as bro, the bro approach, no science, just going in making stuff up, right?
Yep.
And then the that was kind of the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, and then the last decade was, oh, we know better, right? But they knew a little bit of science, right? A little bit of science, and all of a sudden we know better.
Mm-hmm.
And then not anybody out there watching, but us cumulatively as a community. But 2020 is really okay. Now we know a lot, so that's course correct.
Yep.
So flashback to 2010, 2012. You're a trainee. You're told that if you have to train with frequency, number one, um, and you're probably doing minimal exercises, a strong lift, starting strength. And I know a starting strength isn't a hypertrophy program specifically, but everyone does it, for hypertrophy. The funny thing is with frequency training, you really didn't see a lot of people doing classical full body workouts like they did in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was doing these 5x5 minimal type of programs. And number 3, there wasn't a real big focus on volume. People talked about it, but you really didn't see much discussion on volume. So let's dive in.
Mm-hmm.
3 big reasons why your muscle building might be failing. Number 1 is you're still attached to the concept that frequency training is king, muscle protein synthesis is king. And if you do not do this, you're an idiot. What are your thoughts on the current science and what it says about that, Robert?
Yeah, this is something we touched on basically as soon as the year kicked off. There was that meta-analysis that Schoenfeld and friends published showing that, all things being equal, training 1 time per week can be just as effective as training 2 or 3 times per week, provided that all volume is equated. Previously, we thought that, oh, well, higher frequency is better. The issue is that those studies showing that the higher frequency group was ultimately doing more volume by the end of the week. However, when Schoenfeld and the groups collated all the data, put it together, reanalyzed it, they found out, hey, if both groups are doing the same amount of volume, whether they're doing it 1 time a week, 2 times a week, or 3 times a week, as long as the volume of the total number of hard sets per week is about the same, the muscle growth potential is going to be the same regardless. So that's kind of showing back, hey, we get back to the root of it. Volume is a key driver in hypertrophy. Like, you have to be performing a sufficient amount of a base level of volume if you want to get results. After that, frequency is a way to kind of manipulate your volume to allow you to either execute a higher total amount of workload over time, or maybe, kind of step around or kind of massage things in your training program to where maybe you don't have your stabilizing muscles can't bear doing 10 hard sets in a workout, to where you'd be better suited by splitting, a muscle group's 10 sets between a Monday, 5 hard sets, and then 5 hard sets on Thursday, something like that. But the core concept is the frequency isn't what's driving your muscle growth there. It is the hard sets that you're doing each week. How you divide that is ultimately a matter of personal preference and your body's ability to recover and perform at a high level.
So, Robert, I'm gonna jump in because something you said is going to result in people posting comments for the pro frequency group, and I want to address that before we move on. And that is, in these older studies, the frequency group was getting in more volume. And that was driving the hypertrophy. And when volume is equal between full body and a bro split, or body part split, then the science actually shows a body part split might be better, might be slightly better. But somebody's going to respond that, and I had this happen before, that, okay, so with frequency training, you can get in more volume. No, that's not true at all. And I'm going to explain why. That's how they had these studies set up, but that's not how it is in the real world. And let me explain. Let's look at 3-day training, which is a typical frequency, standard, the gold standard, and then 4 days of training. If you look at a volume per body part, and, Schoenfeld says around 10 hard sets per major body part. We're going to go with 12, Robert. So 12 for back, chest, shoulders, and quads. We got 48 sets. We're going to add 6 sets for arms, biceps, and triceps. We're up to 60 sets. We're going to do 4 for traps, 4 for abs, 4 for calves. We're up to 72 sets. You could do more than that, but we're just going to use that as kind of a reasonable starting point. So if you do 72 hard sets, and that's the key here, right? Hard sets, because without hard training, there is no results, and every expert will agree. These 72 sets have to be hard. So if you do them over the course of 4 workouts per week, even upper lower would be a reasonable choice, 4 times a week, or a body part split 4 times a week. You're doing 16 hard sets a day. And anybody that has worked with me that does 16 hard sets a day knows they're getting their money's worth. It's not easy. So on a full body workout, a frequency training where you're going full blast 4 days a week, or 3 days a week, I'm sorry, you're looking at 24 hard sets per day and a greater density of compound movements per day. And if you can get through that alive, and over a long period of time, you have my respect. Therefore, the argument that hardcore frequency 3 times a week is somehow better from a volume standpoint than even an upper lower or a body part split is absolutely nonsense. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, you're right, Stephen. I mean, we always say that anecdotal evidence. So, like, on the hierarchy of evidence, anecdotal evidence is kind of on like the lower rungs there. But if you look at the greatest bodybuilders, the mass monsters, muscle machines that have ever been, that walk the face of the earth, how did they get big? What did they use? Almost all of them were using bro splits. Like, in the golden era, they were doing full body stuff. But I mean, basically, since like Arnold's time forward, everybody, natural or enhanced, they were using the pro split or the bro split as their training.
So that transitions us into point number 2, the second big reason why your muscle building might be failing. And that is something the old schoolers used to do that we thought was a joke. We thought was bro science, and that's targeting a muscle from different angles. It used to be the belief that if you did an incline press, you can target a certain area of a muscle. And we laughed at that for so long as a community. I'm not saying me or you specifically, I'm saying as a community. But what we're finding now is the science actually shows that regional hypertrophy is a real thing. And therefore, what that means is you can stress a different area of a muscle more than other areas. So what that means is, like, minimal programs, these minimal full body programs that we were talking about that have really nothing to do with like the old school 50s programs, um, multiple exercises is probably a better way to go because regional hypertrophy looks like it's a real thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, agreed. Now, important thing that we're gonna caveat is somebody's gonna take this. Whatever you say on the internet, somebody always takes it to like the extreme. When Steve's
Right.
saying targeting a muscle, we're not saying that in the context of isolating a muscle. So, for the instance, on an incline press, we're not saying you're using that exercise just to,
Right.
isolate the clavicular head of the pecs there, and we're completely deactivating the pec minor and the sternocostal head of the pecs. We're saying that more of the tension is biased to that region of the musculature. It's not completely isolating it. Same thing if you're doing like an incline curl. You're working one of the heads a little bit harder in a different angle than you are on a seated curl or on a standing curl, because the way gravity is hitting the muscles is different based on the way you're lifting the weight and where the tension is falling. So all these you get to start playing around with these force vectors, which is really kind of cool. And that's kind of where like if you have an engineering nerdy background like I do, you kind of understand where all these force vectors and tension points hit on the muscles, and it's a really cool thing to understand from like a biomechanics standpoint. But yeah, that the regional hypertrophy is definitely something that's real. What's cool now is like all these old concepts that the bodybuilders from the golden era were doing. We're seeing them validated. So, the 1 time a week training that got poo-pooed for so long is actually panning out in the research to show it a viable option. Training muscles using a bunch of different exercises, not a bunch, but, a handful of different exercises to stress the muscles at different points and from different angles is panning out to lead to ultimately better muscle building quality. Now, your hypertrophy, say you only did like one style of curls your entire training career, you're going to get a certain amount of hypertrophy. Would you get as much as hypertrophy as somebody that's using a couple of different exercises? I'm going to say probably not. Maybe in the grand scheme of like all hypertrophy would be there, but in terms of total development of the muscle, it's going to be more well-rounded and better shaped by the individual using a variety of exercises than an individual just doing only a single exercise.
Right. I mean, in the long run, the standard that we talk about a lot is still the gold standard. Over time, if you work hard, you're going to get close to your natural potential, regardless of the method. So, when we say that using multiple exercises looks like it's better than one, could you get good results on one? If you work hard, absolutely. Is it the most efficient way? No. What rate will that slow down your hypertrophy gains? Well, even if it's only 5, 10, 15%, that's still a substantial amount of, slowing of the rate when you're in the real world in the gym. So, the guys back in the 50s, we had programs like HLM, heavy, light, medium, where they were doing different exercises each day. And, in the 70s, we had a reasonable exercise variety, even in the 80s. But the last decade, it was like barbell, barbell, the cult of barbell. Everything was a barbell. Everything was a barbell. Even trying to get some of my clients to do dumbbell work in this day and age is like, I'm going to do barbell. Well, you kind of got to do dumbbell as well. I try to get them to do a body weight exercise, a dumbbell exercise, a barbell exercise, a unilateral exercise, and then maybe something that doesn't fit in those paradigms, that complements them. So,
Mm-hmm.
multiple exercises. And Robert, there's another point I want to touch on that, we've known forever, and it's kind of hints at this, what you're talking about with force vectors. If you go out and train your calves for, say, a year doing, a couple exercises, let's say you do seated and standing calf raises, and, your body has had an adequate amount of time to get used to that work.
Mm-hmm.
If you go out and do like hill work, just walking up hills for an hour today, like stuff that the ultra runners do, you're going to be sore in your calves in a way that the seated and standing calf raises that you've acclimated to aren't hitting you. So it shows you that it's not good enough. There's other things out there, like the addition of that work is making you sore, and it hints at like it's a new type of stimulus. It's a different stimulus with different force planes, etc. Correct?
Agreed. Correct.
So, Robert, we're going to touch on the last point here. The third big reason why your muscle building might be failing is, this is an interesting one when it comes to volume, is that volume has no scientific limits, right? So, the research is basically showing we haven't found the end limit to the benefit of volume. But pragmatically, there's a pragmatic limit. And pragmatically means we only have so much time in the day. We just can't do 3-hour workouts. But where people fail on this is they read this as volume is the holy grail, and they prioritize volume because volume has no end limit to its benefit above hard work. The reality is you should go into the gym, try to maximize set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, and then you continue that path until the gas tank is empty, and that's your pragmatic volume limit. Any thoughts on that, Robert?
Yeah, exactly, Steve. It's we go back to the thing I said at the outset of this video. Hard sets are what's going to be driving hypertrophy. How close are you pushing those muscles to a high level of fatigue with sufficient amounts of tension and volume? From the research side of things, Schoenfeld and Krieger had that super high volume study, which got debated endlessly, is probably as much as the Game Changers documentary on Netflix did. And then Krieger ran a few of his own personal experiments where he was doing, I want to say, upwards of like 40 or 50 sets a week for certain body parts. But the thing to keep in mind is that was for a small lagging muscle group. When you go to something and you put something on super high volume or super high frequency, everything else needs to take a backseat to allow for sufficient recovery resources in the body. You can't max out everything. You can't be doing 40 sets for chest, back, shoulders, abs, glutes, bis, tris, everything. You're going to run yourself into the ground. From a scientific standpoint, yeah, we haven't found that upper threshold. Like we've seen in a few studies where there's kind of a plateauing effect, and then there's another handful of studies which they shows a U-shaped curve. But a lot of this is there's an individual component to it as well that maybe some individuals respond really well. There's hyper responders. They can respond well to low volumes. They can respond well to medium volumes and high volumes. You have other people that are poor responders to where they don't really respond well to 10 hard sets per week. Maybe they've got to do 15, 20, 25. That's where the individuality and programming comes in. That's going to take a little bit of testing on your own part and working with a good coach that can kind of identify, hey, are you pushing these sets hard enough? Are you actually doing 20 quality sets per week for a muscle group and you're still not growing? That's where there's going to be a little bit of give and take. But back to practicality, how many people have time to spend 2 or 3 hours in the gym 5 days a week? If your volume is if you want to do 25 sets for every body part, do you have the time outside, unless your job is training for a living? Most people don't.
If you want to play around with volume, there are specific ways that you can do so.
Yep.
But the volume should be cycled over time. If you go volume, volume, volume like a bulldozer, you're gonna bulldoze your body. It's not going to end well. So you can do, and the old timers did this. You can do specialty routines or specialization routines, where you could really focus on back for 8 weeks and put the other stuff just on a slight back down on the back burner on volume, maybe a 25 to 30% decrease. And then you're getting to the point where you're overreaching kind of bit, and you pull back and take a deload week. And then maybe you focus on chest for a while. So you could do some kind of rotational system where you focus on different muscle groups. Or you could do, over time, you could do a periodization where you ramp up the volume, hit a peak, and then drop it back down again.
Yep.
So you're not constantly in that volume stage. Robert, one final thought. Something came to mind when we were talking about this, and that is back in the day, Stuart McRobert and the Bronze Series. Are you familiar with that?
Barely.
Well, basically, what Stewart would do is take people out of the. It's odd, but he would take people out of the pro bodybuilding paradigm and get them on hard sets, and perhaps fewer sets, but they were hard sets and focused on progression. And people started seeing results, so therefore it was the method, right? But really what Stuart McRobert did was, check out the book Brawn. What he did was get people off a lot of junk volume onto a very focused hard work and progressive overload. And it was a little bit lighter volume than most people were used to, but because it was hard work and because it was progression, people started to see progress. So that's kind of a good starting point. You don't have to dive into the volume pool if you're looking to increase your hypertrophy. Probably a good idea to start focusing on making those sets count 1 through 10, adding them as you can, and keeping that focus on progression. Any final thoughts, Robert?
No, that's it. I mean, I started 10 hard sets, bust your balls on those, and then go from there. Eat hard, sleep hard, train hard.
Yeah, and just as an end cap, we would never say on this channel that one workout won't deliver results. Anything will deliver results if you're working hard enough. With that said, what we're trying to do is take this year and trying to educate people like, hey, some of the old ways we're programmed that don't work, or we're programmed like they become super dogmatic, some of the old ways, like you have to do this. What we're basically saying is that's basically what we know scientifically bullshit. So guys, hope this video has been of some help. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. If you made it this far in this video and have yet to subscribe to my channel, please do. I'd appreciate the support. Follow Robert on social media, The Supplement Engineer, on YouTube, on Instagram. Slide into his DM with all kinds of questions. All right, thanks, Robert. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Steve.